Hello everyone, this is your instructor in income taxation. Still, our topic for today is fundamental principles of taxation. This is the fourth part of the fundamental principles of taxation. Let's begin with the basic principles of a sound tax system. Kapag sinabing sound tax system, ang ibig sabihin niyan ay maayos na tax system. According to Adam Smith, governments should adhere to certain principles to evolve a sound tax system. Meaning to say, ang isang maayos na tax system ay merong tatlong basic principles. And those principles are, first, fiscal adequacy, second, administrative feasibility, and third, theoretical justice or equity. Ang mnemonics natin dito ay FAT. F for fiscal adequacy, A for administrative feasibility, and T for theoretical justice or equity. Kapag sinabing fiscal adequacy, it requires that the sources of government funds must be sufficient to cover government costs. In other words, dapat sapat ang nakokolektang taxes ng gobyerno para sa kanyang pangangailangan, para sa kanyang expenditures or costs. Kaya nga, as the term implies, adequacy, dapat sapat ang government revenue. The government must not incur a deficit. When we say deficit, mas malaki yung costs ng government kaysa sa kanyang revenue. So, hindi dapat mangyari na mas mataas yung cost ng government or mas malaki yung cost ng government kaysa sa kanyang revenue. Kasi if ever na mangyari yon, then the government can no longer provide the essential public services to the people. So, that is the meaning of fiscal adequacy. Dapat sapat yung revenue ng gobyerno para sa kanyang pangangailangan. Kapag sinabi namang administrative feasibility, it suggests that tax laws should be capable of efficient and effective administration to encourage compliance. So, sa madaling salita, dapat nag-e-evolve yung tax laws para mas madali at mas maayos yung pag-assess at pag-collect ng taxes. Dapat na mas madali at mas maayos yung pag-assess at pag-collect ng taxes to encourage compliance. Para nga mag-file ng tax return at magbayad ng tax ang taxpayers. Dapat hindi rin complicated yung tax laws para maintindihan yung tax laws ng taxpayers. At dapat mas madali para sa mga taxpayers na mag-comply. A very good application of administrative feasibility is the electronic filing and electronic payment of taxes. Dati kasi, ang filing ng tax return at ang pagbayad ng taxes ay manual. Ngayon, with the advent of technology, pwede nang mag-file ng tax return online at magbayad ng tax online. Yan yung sinasabing electronic filing and electronic payment of taxes. And that is a very good application of administrative feasibility. Kapag sinabi namang theoretical justice or equity, it suggests that taxation should consider the taxpayer's ability to pay. So yung tax na ini-impose at kokolektahin sa taxpayers ay proportionate sa abilidad ng taxpayers na magbayad ng taxes. When we say theoretical justice or equity, it doesn't mean na pare-parehas yung babayaran nating taxes. But rather, it depends upon the taxpayer's ability to pay. So, kung sakaling ikaw ay mas may kakayahan, mas mayaman ka kasi, therefore, mas malaki dapat yung babayaran mong tax compared sa ibang taxpayers na mas kokonte ang kinikita or mas kokonte ang kanilang kakayahan na magbayad ng taxes. So those who have more should be taxed more, and those who have less should contribute less. Yan yung sinasabi nating theoretical justice or equity. So again, the basic principles of a sound tax system are fiscal adequacy, administrative feasibility, and theoretical justice or equity. Let's now proceed to the classification of taxes. There are different classifications of taxes. So, klina-classify natin yung taxes as to subject matter or object, as to who bears the burden, as to determination of amount, as to purpose, as to graduation or rate, and as to taxing authority. I'm going to discuss each of these classifications. Unahin natin yung classification of taxes as to subject matter or object. Classification of taxes as to subject matter or object. When we say as to subject matter or object, sino ba o ano ba ang tinatax? Sino ba o ano ba ang pinapatawan ng taxes? As to subject matter or object, may tatlong klase ng tax. First, personal, poll, or capitation tax. Second, property tax. And third, excise tax, or otherwise known as privilege tax. The first one is personal, poll, or capitation tax. So, iisa lang yung ibig sabihin ng mga yan. Dito sa personal, poll, or capitation tax, ang tinatax talaga ay yung mismong tao. So, hindi na mahalaga yung property ng tao or yung kinatatayuan sa buhay ng isang tao. Kasi nga, ang tinatax talaga dito ay siya bilang tao. Ang common example ng personal, poll, or capitation tax ay yung community tax or sedula. So dahil binigyan ka ng karapatan na tumira sa isang community, you have to pay community tax. Kailangan mong magbayad ng sedula. That is the meaning of personal, poll, or capitation tax. Next is property tax. Ang tinatax naman dito ay yung ari-arian. For example, I have 5 properties. Ilang beses akong magbabayad ng property tax? Of course, 5 times. Kasi 5 yung properties ko. Hindi ako yung tinatax dito, kundi yung properties ko. Therefore, 5 beses akong magbabayad ng property tax. Next, excise tax or privilege tax. When we say excise tax, it is a tax imposed upon the performance of an act, enjoyment of a privilege, or engagement in an occupation. In other words, this is a tax on the exercise of rights or privileges. That's why yung ibang tawag sa excise tax ay privilege tax kasi yung excise tax ay yung tax na ini-impose sa pag-exercise ng rights or privileges. Some examples of excise tax are income tax, donor's tax, and estate tax. Income tax is a tax on the privilege to earn. Donor's tax is a tax on the privilege to donate, and estate tax is a tax on the privilege na magpamana. Take note na yung excise tax na tinutukoy dito ay yung tax on the exercise of rights or privileges. Meron din kasing excise tax na ang ibig sabihin ay tax na ini-impose sa non-essential commodities or goods gaya ng sigarilyo at alak. So, wag kayong mako-confuse. Next, classification of taxes as to who bears the burden. So, klina-classify din natin yung tax base kung sino ang nagbabayad ng tax. As to who bears the burden, may dalawang klase ng tax. Yung una ay tinatawag na direct tax at yung pangalawa ay tinatawag na indirect tax. Direct tax is a tax collected from the person who is intended to pay the same. So kung sino ang intended ng batas na magbayad ng tax, siya talaga mismo yung totoong magbabayad o nagbabayad ng tax. Kaya tinawag na direct tax. Ang examples ng direct tax ay income tax, donor's tax, at estate tax. Kung sino ang kumita, siya yung magbabayad ng income tax. Kung sino ang nag-donate, siya ang magbabayad ng donor's tax. Kung sino ang nagpamana, siya ang magbabayad ng tax. This tax cannot be shifted to another person. So kung sino ang intended na magbayad ng tax, hindi niya pwedeng ipasa yung burden sa ibang tao. So ang direct tax, hindi siya pwedeng ipasa or i-shift sa ibang tao. On the other hand, when we say indirect tax, it is a tax paid by any person other than the one who is intended to pay the same. So kung sino ang intended na magbayad ng tax, hindi siya yung mismo na magbabayad ng tax sa government. Meron kasing tinatawag na statutory taxpayer at economic taxpayer. Yung statutory taxpayer, siya yung taxpayer na pinangalanan ng batas na magbayad ng tax. Yung economic taxpayer naman, siya yung taxpayer na talagang magbabayad ng tax. In indirect tax, the statutory taxpayer is not the economic taxpayer. Ang common example ng indirect tax ay business taxes gaya ng VAT or value-added tax at other percentage tax. Itong business tax, this is a tax on consumption. Since this is a tax on consumption, kung sino ang nag-consume or kung sino ang consumer, siya dapat ang magbabayad ng tax. Pero ang pinangalanan ng batas na magbayad ng tax or mag-remit ng tax ng consumers sa gobyerno ay yung business taxpayer. So dito sa indirect tax, pwedeng i-shift or pwedeng ipasa yung burden sa ibang tao. That's why tinawag siyang indirect tax. Balik tayo sa direct tax. Dito sa direct tax, since hindi pwedeng i-shift or ipasa yung burden sa ibang tao, the statutory taxpayer is the economic taxpayer. Yung statutory taxpayer at economic taxpayer ay iisang taxpayer. So, as to who bears the burden, the taxes are classified either as indirect tax or direct tax. Next, classification of taxes as to determination of amount. As to determination of amount, may dalawang klase ng tax. First is specific tax and second is ad valorem tax. When we say specific tax, it is a tax of an amount imposed on a per unit basis such as per kilo, liter, or meter, etc. In other words, ito yung tax na pinapataw kada unit. Meaning to say, merong unit of measurement. Ang example ng specific tax ay excise tax on cigarettes and liquors. Yung excise tax na pinapataw sa sigarilyo at alak. Let's say sa sigarilyo, pinapataw yung excise tax sa sigarilyo kada pakete or per pack. Yung excise tax naman dun sa distilled spirits, for example, pinapataw yung excise tax kada proof liter. Yun ang sinasabing specific tax. That is a tax of an amount imposed on a per unit basis. Merong unit of measurement. On the other hand, ad valorem tax is a tax of a fixed proportion imposed upon the value of the tax object. Ito naman, nakadepende sa value ng tax object. Ang examples ng ad valorem tax ay income tax, donor's tax, estate tax, and VAT or value added tax. Ang income tax ay ad valorem tax kasi nakadepende yung income tax sa kung ilan ang kinita or kung ilan yung income. Donor's tax is an ad valorem tax kasi nakadepende yung donor's tax sa kung ano yung value ng property na dinonate. Ang estate tax ay ad valorem tax kasi nakadepende yung estate tax sa value ng property na pinamana. Ang VAT or value added tax ay ad valorem tax kasi nakadepende yung value added tax sa value ng item na binili or kinonsume. Yun yung ibig sabihin ng ad valorem tax. This is a tax based on the value of the tax object, or this is a tax imposed upon the value of the tax object. Next, classification of taxes as to purpose. So, klina-classify din natin yung taxes, depende kung ano yung purpose, kung bakit pinapataw yung tax. So, as to purpose, may dalawang klase ng tax. Yung una ay primary, fiscal, or revenue tax. At yung pangalawa ay tinatawag na secondary, regulatory, special, or sumptuary tax. When we say primary, fiscal, or revenue tax, this is a tax imposed solely for the general purpose of the government. So, pinapataw ang tax na ito para lang sa general purpose. And that general purpose is to raise revenue for the government. Ang examples ng primary, fiscal, or revenue tax ay income tax, donor's tax, at estate tax. On the other hand, secondary, regulatory, special, or sumptuary tax is a tax imposed for a specific purpose. So, pinapataw ang tax na to for a specific purpose. Let's say to achieve social or economic objectives. Ang examples ng secondary, regulatory, special, or sumptuary tax ay tariff at certain duties on imports. Let's say, dito sa Pilipinas, kapag nag-produce ang isang farmer ng bawang dito sa Pilipinas, ang production cost ay 6 pesos per kilo. Nabibenta ng isang farmer na yon yung bawang sa halagang 8 pesos per kilo. And then, sa ibang bansa, let's say, nag-produce doon ng bawang at ang production cost ay 3 pesos per kilo. Nabibenta nila yon sa halagang 6 pesos per kilo. So, sa madaling salita, talo ang farmers dito sa Pilipinas kung sakaling dadalhin ng ibang bansa yung bawang dito sa Pilipinas. Kasi nga, ang production cost nila ay 3 pesos per kilo, samantalang dito sa Pilipinas, ang production cost ay 6 pesos per kilo. So, pwede nilang ibenta yon sa halagang 6 pesos, pero yung farmers dito sa Pilipinas, hindi nila pwedeng ibenta yon sa halagang 6 pesos kasi nga wala na silang tubo. So, ang ginagawa ng Philippine government, magpapataw siya ng buwis doon sa importation ng bawang dito sa Pilipinas. So, yan yung sinasabing secondary, regulatory, special, or sumptuary tax. May specific purpose na tinatarget. Next, let's now proceed to the classification of taxes as to graduation or rate. Under this, there are four kinds of tax. First is the proportional tax. Second is the progressive or graduated tax. Third is the regressive tax. And fourth is the mixed tax. When we say proportional tax, this is a flat or fixed rate tax. The use of proportional tax emphasizes equality as it subjects all taxpayers with the same rate without regard to their ability to pay. So meaning to say, ito yung tax na kung saan fixed ang kanyang rate or percentage. Hindi nagbabago yung rate or percentage. Ang examples ng proportional tax ay value-added tax or VAT at excise tax on distilled spirits. Kapag sinabi namang progressive or graduated tax, this is a tax which imposes increasing tax rates as the tax base increases. Meaning to say, ito yung tax na kung saan ang kanyang rate ay tumataas kung tumataas din yung tax base. Kapag sinabing tax base, dito multiply yung tax rate para malaman kung ilan yung babayaran na tax. The use of progressive tax rates results in equitable taxation because it gets more tax to those who are more capable. It aids in lessening the gap between the rich and the poor. So itong progressive or graduated tax ay pabor sa mga mahihirap. Since less capable sila na magbayad ng tax, mas mababa ang babayaran nilang tax or mas maliit yung babayaran nilang tax. Yung mga mayayaman naman, since they are more capable to pay tax, mas malaki yung babayaran nilang tax. Ang example ng progressive or graduated tax ay income tax on individual taxpayers. Kapag sinabi namang regressive tax, this is a tax which imposes decreasing tax rates as the tax base increases. So, kabaliktaran to ng progressive tax. Kung tataas yung tax base, magdi-decrease yung tax rates. Habang tumataas yung tax base, pababa ng pababa yung tax rates. Regressive tax is regarded as anti-poor. It directly violates the constitutional guarantee of progressive taxation. Ang regressive tax ay anti-poor kasi yung mga mahihirap who are less capable of paying tax ang may malaking tax, samantalang yung mga mayayaman who are more capable of paying tax, sila ang may mababang tax. In the Philippines, hindi ginagamit itong regressive tax because it is contrary to the Constitution. Kapag sinabi namang mixed tax, this tax manifests tax rates which is a combination of any of the above types of tax. In other words, ito yung tax na kung saan yung tax rates niya ay combination ng proportional tax, progressive or graduated tax, at regressive tax. Again, as to graduation or rate, there are four kinds of tax, and they are proportional tax, progressive or graduated tax, regressive tax, and mixed tax. Next, classification of taxes as to taxing authority. Klina-classify din ang taxes depende kung sino ang nagpapataw ng tax. Is it the local government or the national government? Kapag yung tax ay pinapataw ng national government, yung tax ay national tax. Ang examples ng national tax ay first, income tax. Ang income tax ay tax on annual income, gains, or profits. Next, second, donor's tax. This is a tax on gratuitous transfer of properties by a living donor. Third, estate tax. This is a tax on gratuitous transfer of properties by a decedent upon death. Dito sa state tax at donor's tax, pareho silang tax on gratuitous transfer of properties. Gratuitous transfer kasi yung taong nag-transfer ng property, hindi siya nag-e-expect ng something in return. Transfer niya yung property sa ibang tao nang walang kapalit. Ang pinagkaiba nila ay dito sa donor's tax, yung transfer ng property is from a living person to another living person. Sa estate tax naman, yung transfer ng property is from a dead person to a living person. Next, fourth, value-added tax or VAT. This is a consumption tax collected by VAT business taxpayers. Fifth, other percentage tax. This is a consumption tax collected by non-VAT business taxpayers. Itong value-added tax at percentage tax, they are both business taxes. Next, sixth, excise tax. This is a tax on seen products and non-essential commodities such as alcohol, cigarettes, and metallic minerals. So ito na yung sinasabi kong excise tax sa non-essential commodities or goods. Yung excise tax na diniscuss ko kanina ay yung privilege tax. So they are technically different. Next, seventh, documentary stamp tax. As the name suggests, ang documentary stamp tax ay yung tax sa documents, instruments, loan agreements, and papers evidencing the acceptance, assignment, sale, or transfer of an obligation, right, or property incident thereto. On the other hand, kapag yung tax ay ini-impose o pinapataw ng local government or municipal government, yung tax ay tinatawag na local tax. Ang examples ng local tax ay real property tax, professional tax, business taxes, fees and charges, community tax, and tax on banks and other financial institutions. Again, as to taxing authority, there are two kinds of tax, and they are the national tax and the local tax.